The evening sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk as 12-year-old Sofia sat hunched over a small folding table outside her apartment building. Her small fingers worked quickly, attaching a tiny button eye to what would become her 10th handmade doll of the week. She paused to wipe away the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to prick herself with the needle she held. From her spot on the sidewalk, Sofia could see into their ground-floor apartment window where her mother Elena rested on the worn-out couch, a colorful blanket pulled up to her chin despite the warm weather. The sight made Sofia's heart sink, but it also strengthened her resolve. She returned to her work with renewed focus, her young face set with determination far beyond her years. 6 months earlier, life had been different. Elena, a talented seamstress known throughout the neighborhood for her magical way with fabrics, had been full of energy and laughter. Their small apartment had buzzed with the constant whirring of her sewing machine as customers came and went, picking up altered wedding dresses and custom curtains. Sofia would return from school to find her mother surrounded by colorful fabrics, humming old songs as she worked. That all changed with a single doctor's visit. What Elena had dismissed as ordinary fatigue turned out to be something far more serious. Cancer, the doctor had said, speaking in a low voice that Sofia wasn't supposed to hear from her spot in the waiting room. An aggressive type that needed immediate treatment. The bills started piling up almost overnight. First came the initial tests, then the consultations with specialists, followed by the first round of treatments that left Elena too weak to work. Their small savings disappeared within weeks. The sewing machine sat silent in the corner, gathering dust. "Someone will buy these today," Sofia whispered to herself as she arranged the 7 completed dolls on her table. Each one was unique, crafted from scraps of fabric she'd collected from her mother's old projects and buttons found in forgotten corners of their apartment or donated by kind neighbors. Some had yarn hair styled in tiny braids. Others wore miniature dresses with delicate stitching that Sofia had learned from watching her mother over the years. A middle-aged woman slowed as she passed by, eyeing the dolls with curiosity. "Did you make these yourself?" she asked, picking up a doll with bright red yarn hair and a green polka dot dress. Sofia nodded eagerly. "Yes, ma'am. They're $10 each." The woman's eyebrows shot up. $10. "They're handmade," Sofia explained, her voice growing smaller. "And I need to raise money for my mom's medicine." The woman set the doll down gently. "They're lovely, sweetie, but I don't have that much on me today." She walked away, leaving Sofia alone again. This had been happening for 2 weeks now. People would stop, admire her work, but rarely purchase anything. On her best day, she'd sold 2 dolls. At this rate, it would take years to save up for the treatment her mother needed, and according to the doctors, they didn't have years. They had months. Inside the apartment, Elena started coughing. Sofia jumped to her feet but hesitated by the table. She couldn't leave her post, not when potential customers might walk by. But her mother needed her too. As the coughing subsided, Sofia slowly sat back down. She pulled out her notebook where she kept careful track of her sales and expenses. So far, she'd earned $78. The special treatment her mother needed cost nearly $50,000. Sofia closed the notebook and took a deep breath. She wouldn't cry. Crying wouldn't help her mother. Instead, she picked up another scrap of fabric and began cutting the shape for a new doll. The evening crowd was starting to head home from work. Maybe someone would stop. Maybe someone would buy all her dolls. Maybe a miracle would happen. What Sofia didn't know was that miracles sometimes wore expensive suits and arrived when you least expected them. Alexander Raid stepped out of the glass doors of his company's satellite office and loosened his tie with a sigh of relief. The day had been long, filled with back-to-back meetings that tested even his legendary patience. As the founder and CEO of Reed Enterprises, a tech company worth billions, his visits to regional offices always turned into marathon sessions of presentations, handshakes, and forced smiles. "Mr. Reed, your car is waiting," his assistant called from the doorway, holding up his phone. Alexander shook his head. "Tell them I won't need it. I think I'll walk back to the hotel." His assistant looked surprised but nodded. "It's about 20 minutes, sir. Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Alexander smiled. "I could use the air." Truth be told, he was tired of being shuttled from one air-conditioned box to another. At 45, he had everything money could buy, but lately he'd been feeling oddly empty. The company that had once been his passion now felt like a machine that ran without him, generating wealth but little purpose. He set off down the street, enjoying the anonymity of being just another man in a suit. This neighborhood was far from the sleek downtown area where he usually stayed. The buildings here were older, the shops smaller, the people less hurried. He passed a local bakery, a laundromat, and a corner store with fruits displayed in wooden crates outside. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Alexander noticed fewer people on the sidewalks. Most were heading home after a long day's work, carrying grocery bags or holding children's hands. He was about to cross the street when something caught his eye. A small girl sat alone at a folding table in front of an apartment building. She couldn't have been more than 12, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. What struck Alexander was her expression, a mixture of hope and determination that seemed too mature for her young face. He slowed his pace, noticing the colorful handmade dolls arranged neatly on the table. Each one was unique, with different outfits and hairstyles, all clearly made with care and attention to detail. The girl was working on another doll, her fingers moving quickly as she attached tiny buttons to what looked like a small jacket. Something about the scene pulled at him. Perhaps it was the fading light, or the girl's solitary figure, or maybe it was the memory of his own childhood struggles after his mother died. Whatever it was, Alexander found himself changing direction, walking toward the girl's table instead of continuing to his hotel. "Did you make all of these?" he asked, picking up a doll with blue yarn hair and a tiny patchwork dress. The girl looked up, surprised to see someone in a business suit taking interest in her crafts. "Yes, sir. I make them all myself." Alexander turned the doll over in his hands, genuinely impressed by the craftsmanship. "These are quite good. How much are you selling them for?" $10 each, she replied, sitting up straighter. "They're all handmade with recycled materials." He nodded, examining the stitching. "I can see that. You have real talent." The girl blushed slightly but maintained eye contact. "Thank you, sir." "My name is Alexander," he said, putting down one doll and picking up another. "What's yours?" "Sophia," she answered. "Sophia Martinez." "Well, Sophia Martinez, you're quite the entrepreneur. How's business going?" Her expression fell slightly. "Not very good. Most people just look and walk away." Alexander glanced at the apartment building behind her. "Do you live here?" Sophia nodded, pointing to a ground floor window where curtains stirred slightly. "With my mom? She's sick." Something in the way she said those 3 words, "she's sick," struck Alexander deeply. There was no self-pity, just a simple statement of fact. "Is that why you're selling the dolls?" he asked quietly. Sophia hesitated before answering, as if weighing whether to trust this stranger in expensive clothes. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn photograph, handing it to Alexander. "That's my mom before she got sick," she said. "She needs special medicine the insurance won't pay for. The doctor says we have 3 months to come up with the money." Alexander looked at the photo of a smiling woman with Sophia's same determined eyes. He handed it back carefully, then looked at the dolls again. "I'll take them," he said. "All of them." Sophia's eyes widened. "All of them?" Alexander nodded, already reaching for his wallet. "Yes, and I'd like to place an order for more." As the streetlights flickered on around them, neither Sophia nor Alexander realized this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. $500, Alexander said, handing Sophia a stack of crisp bills. $50 for each doll. Sophia stared at the money in disbelief. Her hands trembled as she accepted it. "But they're only $10 each," she whispered, looking up at him with wide eyes. Alexander smiled gently. "They're worth much more than that. The craftsmanship alone deserves proper payment." He watched as Sophia carefully counted the money twice before tucking it into a small pouch hidden beneath her table. The care she took with the transaction spoke volumes about her situation. "Would you like to meet my mom?" Sophia asked suddenly, gathering her remaining supplies. "She sewed before she got sick. She taught me everything I know." Alexander checked his watch. His dinner reservation could wait. "I'd be honored," he replied. The apartment was small but spotlessly clean. Family photos lined the walls, and the furniture, though worn, was arranged with care. In the living room, a hospital bed had been set up near the window. The woman lying there looked like an older version of Sophia, but illness had hollowed her cheeks and dulled her eyes. "Mom, this is Mr. Reed," Sophia announced. "He bought all my dolls." Elena Martinez tried to sit up, but Alexander quickly moved forward. "Please, don't get up on my account, and call me Alexander." Elena's smile was warm despite her obvious pain. "Thank you for encouraging my daughter's work. She's been so determined." "Your daughter has remarkable talent," Alexander said, taking a seat in the chair Sophia offered him. "These dolls show real creativity." As they talked, Alexander learned more about their story. Elena had been a seamstress for a local theater company before her diagnosis. No family to help, no savings to fall back on. The specialized treatment she needed wasn't covered by their basic insurance. "The regular treatments make me so sick," Elena explained, her voice soft. "The doctor says this new therapy has fewer side effects and better results for my type of cancer, but it costs too much," Sophia finished, her small hand reaching for her mother's. Alexander felt something stir inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. His own mother had died from cancer when he was 14, leaving him with a father who buried himself in work rather than grief. The memory of those lonely days after her death had been locked away for decades. "My mother had cancer too," he found himself saying. "I was about your age when she was diagnosed." Sophia looked up sharply. "Did she get better?" Alexander shook his head slowly. "No, the treatments back then weren't as good as they are now." "I'm sorry," Elena said, her eyes filled with understanding. An uncomfortable silence fell. Alexander glanced at the sewing machine in the corner, covered with a cloth. Beside it stood several bins of fabric scraps, neatly organized by color. "Sophia told me you were a seamstress," he said, changing the subject. Elena's face brightened. "Yes, costumes mostly. I love creating characters through clothing." "Mom made outfits for plays and movies," Sophia said proudly. "Even some that were on TV." As they continued talking, Alexander noticed the medication bottles on the side table, the appointment calendar on the wall, the medical bills partially hidden under a book. Despite their circumstances, there was no self-pity in this household, only a quiet determination to face each day. When it was time to leave, Alexander shook Elena's hand gently. "It was a pleasure meeting you." "The pleasure was mine," she replied. "And thank you for what you did for Sophia today. You've given us hope." In the hallway outside, Sophia walked him to the building entrance. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. "I'll have new dolls ready." Alexander looked down at this remarkable child who shouldered responsibilities far beyond her years. In his world of corporate mergers and profit margins, he'd forgotten what real courage looked like. "I'll be back," he promised. "And Sophia, I think I might have an idea that could help you and your mother." As he walked back to his hotel, the dolls carefully packed in his briefcase, Alexander found himself making phone calls to his assistant, to his marketing team, to a medical specialist he knew. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or stock prices. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of something new for all of them. The next afternoon, Sophia rushed home from school and quickly changed into her cleanest shirt. She had spent the previous night making 3 new dolls, staying up well past her bedtime to finish them. Her fingers were sore from sewing, but the excitement of Alexander's promised return kept her energy high. "Do you really think he'll come back?" her mother asked from her bed, where she was propped up against pillows, looking through an old photo album. "He promised," Sophia said simply, arranging her new dolls on the table by the window. She had given them special attention. One wore a tiny business suit similar to Alexander's, another had a doctor's coat made from white fabric scraps, and the third wore a cape like a superhero. Elena smiled weakly. "Well, either way, you made $500 yesterday. That's a wonderful start." Before Sophia could respond, a knock sounded at their door. Her heart jumped. She smoothed her hair and hurried to answer it. Alexander stood there, but he wasn't alone. Behind him was a woman carrying a medical bag and a man with a laptop case. "Hello, Sophia," Alexander said warmly. "I hope we're not interrupting. I've brought some people I'd like you and your mother to meet." Sophia stepped back, suddenly nervous. "Mom's having a good day today," she said cautiously. They entered the small apartment. Elena attempted to sit up straighter when she saw the visitors, embarrassment coloring her pale cheeks. "I'm sorry I don't have much to offer you," she began, but Alexander waved away her concern. "Please, don't worry about that. This is Lisa," he gestured to the woman with the medical bag. "She's a home care nurse. And this is Tom, my business manager." Lisa approached Elena with a kind smile. "Mr. Raid thought you might benefit from some in-home nursing care. Would it be all right if we talked about your current treatment plan?" While Lisa spoke quietly with Elena, Alexander invited Sofia to sit at their small kitchen table where Tom had set up his laptop. "Sofia, I spent all night thinking about your goals," Alexander began, his eyes bright with excitement. "I showed them to some of my colleagues, and everyone agreed. They're special. The craftsmanship, the personality in each one, you can't find that in stores." Sofia blushed at the praise. "Thank you. I have a business proposition for you," Alexander continued. "I believe your dolls could sell for much more than $10 each if we marketed them properly. With my help, we could turn this into a real business, one that could pay for your mother's treatment and much more." Tom turned his laptop so Sofia could see the screen. "We've put together some initial projections based on specialty toy markets." Sofia stared at the numbers on the screen, not understanding all of them but recognizing they were much bigger than anything she had imagined. But she glanced toward her mother, who was now talking animatedly with Lisa. "I can't leave Mom alone. And I have school." Alexander nodded in understanding. "That's why Lisa is here. If you agree, she'll come by every day to help your mother while you're at school. Then in the afternoons, you and I will work on building this business together. I'll teach you everything you need to know." Sophia's brow furrowed. "Why would you do all this for us? You don't even know us." Alexander was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "When I was 14, my mother died of cancer. My father was wealthy, but busy. Money wasn't our problem, time was. We ran out of it before we found the right treatment." His voice grew softer. "I wasn't able to help my mother then, but maybe I can help yours now." And he added, his voice brightening, "These dolls are genuinely good. I believe in them, and I believe in you." Sophia looked at the 3 new dolls she had made. The businessman, the doctor, and the superhero. Last night, they had just been scraps of fabric. Now they represented something much bigger, a chance to save her mother. "What would we call it?" "The business," she asked, her first practical question revealing her growing interest. Alexander smiled. "I was thinking Sophia's Hope. What do you think?" From across the room, Elena watched her daughter's face light up with something she hadn't seen in months, not just determination, but actual hope. She gave a small nod of encouragement. "I think," Sophia said slowly, "that I have a lot to learn about business." "We start tomorrow," Alexander replied, extending his hand for a proper handshake. "Partners?" Sophia's small hand met his. "Partners." The living room of Sophia and Elena's apartment had transformed over the past 3 weeks. What was once a quiet space now buzzed with energy and purpose. A large whiteboard covered one wall, filled with colorful notes and sketches. Fabric samples and design patterns were neatly organized on a new table that Alexander had brought in. The sewing machine, Elena's prized possession, had been moved to the center of the room, no longer covered in dust but humming steadily as Sophia worked. "Remember to keep the stitches even," Elena called from her bed, which had been positioned to give her a clear view of Sophia's work. Though still weak, the regular visits from Lisa, the home care nurse, had improved her energy levels. The medication Alexander had helped them afford was working better than the previous treatments, giving Elena good days among the bad ones. "I know, Mom," Sophia replied with a smile, not taking her eyes off the delicate dress she was sewing for a new doll design. Her school backpack lay forgotten in the corner. Homework could wait until later. The front door opened, and Alexander walked in, balancing 3 takeout containers and a folder tucked under his arm. "Sorry I'm late," he called out. The meeting with the toy store buyers ran longer than expected. Sophia jumped up, carefully setting aside her work. "What did they say? Did they like the dolls?" Alexander set down their dinner and pulled out a chair. His suit jacket was wrinkled, and his tie was loosened, signs of a long day. But his eyes sparkled with excitement. "They didn't just like them," he said. opening the folder to reveal a signed document. They loved them. The owner of Bright Star Toys wants to place an initial order for $50. Elena gasped. 50? But we've only made 15 so far. That's why we need to talk about scaling up, Alexander said, spreading out some papers on the table. We need to find a way to make more dolls without losing what makes them special. Sophia frowned, picking up one of her creations, a doll with copper-colored yarn hair and a dress made from scraps of an old curtain. But I make each one different on purpose. They're not supposed to be all the same. Alexander nodded, understanding her concern. And they won't be. That's what makes Sophia's Hope different from other toy companies. Each doll will still be unique, but we need more hands to help make them. As they ate dinner together, a routine that had developed naturally over the weeks, Alexander explained his plan. They would hire a small team of people who needed work, maybe other parents from Sophia's school or neighbors looking for jobs. Sophia would train them in her techniques and oversee the quality of each doll. And the best part, he continued, showing them a mock-up on his tablet, is the website and social media accounts the marketing team has created. Each doll will come with a story card about overcoming challenges. We'll share your mother's journey too, if that's okay with both of you. Elena looked uncertain. Our story? Why would people care about that? Because it's real, Alexander said simply. In a world full of mass-produced everything, people connect with authentic stories. Your courage, both of you, that's what will make people fall in love with these dolls. Later that evening, after Alexander had left and Elena had fallen asleep, Sophia sat by the window looking at the street below. 3 weeks ago, she had sat there selling dolls one by one, desperate and afraid. Now she had a business partner, a company name, and orders coming in from a real toy store. She pulled out her notebook, no longer just for tracking sales but filled with business terms Alexander had taught her, profit margins, overhead costs, marketing strategies. Words that had seemed foreign at first but now made sense. Next to these notes were her doll designs, growing more confident with each page. A text message lit up her phone. A new phone Alexander had insisted she needed for business purposes. Big news. The message from Alexander read: a lifestyle blogger found our social media page and wants to feature your dolls in her next post. She has over 500,000 followers. Sophia hugged the phone to her chest, her heart racing with excitement and a touch of fear. Everything was happening so fast. What had started as a desperate attempt to save her mother was turning into something bigger than she had ever imagined. Tomorrow, they would interview their first potential workers. Next week, they would visit a small workshop space Alexander had found nearby. The doctor had scheduled Elena for her specialized treatment, now fully funded through their first sales. Sophia's Hope was no longer just a name. It was becoming a reality. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the workshop as Sophia walked between the tables, checking on the progress of each doll. What had started as a desperate attempt to save her mother had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. 20 people now worked in the bright space that Alexander had rented for Sophia's Hope, most of them parents from her neighborhood who had previously struggled to find jobs that accommodated their family's needs. This one needs more stuffing, Sophia said gently to an older woman who was finishing a doll with dark braided hair. Remember, they need to feel huggable. The woman nodded and reached for more cotton filling. My granddaughter said the same thing when I showed her the one I brought home. She wouldn't put it down all evening. Sophia smiled, but the worry lines on her forehead remained. She glanced at her watch, almost time for school. Ever since the business had taken off, balancing her education and her responsibilities had become increasingly difficult. Her teachers were understanding, but the dark circles under her eyes told the story of late nights spent filling orders and early mornings reviewing designs. The workshop door swung open and Alexander rushed in, holding his tablet like it contained winning lottery numbers. Sophia, have you seen this? He called out, his usually calm business voice high with excitement. The blog post went live last night. Sophia hurried over, wiping her hands on her apron. The lifestyle blogger who had discovered their dolls had finally published her article, complete with beautiful photographs of the dolls and the story behind them. It's incredible, Alexander continued, scrolling through the comments section. Over 3,000 shares already, and people are flooding our website. We've received more orders this morning than in the entire past month." The workers gathered around, murmuring excitedly as Alexander showed them the article. There were their dolls, photographed in artistic poses that highlighted their handmade charm. And there was Sophia's story, her mother's illness, her determination to help, and Alexander's chance discovery of her sidewalk stand. "This is wonderful news," said one of the workers. "Does this mean more hours for us?" Alexander nodded. "It certainly does. In fact, we'll need to hire more people just to keep up with demand." While everyone celebrated, Sophia stepped aside, a knot forming in her stomach. More orders meant more work, more responsibility, and less time for school, less time with her mother, less time to just be 12 years old. Later that afternoon, Sophia sat beside her mother's bed, scrolling through the hundreds of messages that had poured in since the article went viral. "Listen to this one, Mom," she said. "My daughter has cancer too, and your story gives me hope. I ordered one of your dolls for her hospital room. People are connecting with us, not just buying dolls." Elena looked better than she had in months. The specialized treatment was working, bringing color back to her cheeks and strength to her voice. She reached for Sophia's hand. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "But I'm worried too. You look exhausted, honey." Sophia shrugged. "There's just so much to do. Alexander is teaching me about inventory management and supply chains, and I have a math test tomorrow, and the new fabric supplier delivered the wrong colors." Elena squeezed her daughter's hand. "You're still a child, Sophia. This is wonderful, but it shouldn't take over your life." Before Sophia could respond, her phone rang. Alexander, probably with more news about orders or media requests. In the 2 months since they'd begun working together, he had become like family, joining them for dinner most evenings and always checking on Elena's progress. But lately, his calls had been all business, all urgency. When she answered, his voice confirmed her fears. "Sophia, we have a problem. The main toy store chain wants to place an order for 500 dolls to be delivered in 3 weeks. 500? Sophia gasped. "That's impossible. Each doll takes hours to make properly." "I know," Alexander replied, his voice tight with stress. "But this is the opportunity we've been waiting for. If we can fill this order, we'll have enough money for your mother's complete treatment plan, plus a cushion for your future." Sophia looked at her mother, who was watching her with concern. The success they had dreamed of was here, but it came with impossible demands. The dolls that had started as a labor of love were becoming a source of overwhelming pressure. "I need to think about it," Sophia said finally. "Can you come over tonight? We should talk about this together with Mom." As she hung up, Elena reached out to stroke her daughter's hair. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Remember why we started this, not just for the money, but for hope." Sophia nodded, but the weight on her young shoulders felt heavier than ever. Success, she was learning, brought its own kind of problems. 6 months later, Sophia stood at the entrance of the new Sophia's Hope headquarters, hardly believing her eyes. The building was nothing fancy from the outside, just a renovated warehouse in their neighborhood, but inside was a different story. Bright, airy workspaces filled with people, each station personalized by its worker. Children's drawings hung on the walls alongside framed newspaper articles about their story. The sewing machines hummed with activity and laughter mixed with the sounds of work. "Ready for the big day?" Alexander asked, coming to stand beside her. He looked different now, more relaxed, his expensive suits replaced by casual clothes that made him look younger somehow. "I think so," Sophia replied, smoothing down her dress. "Mom's nervous about the speech, though." "She'll do great," Alexander assured her. Everyone loves hearing from her. And it was true. Elena, now in full remission, had become the heart of their growing company. Her health had improved dramatically once she'd received the specialized treatment, and though she still tired easily, she had taken on the role of quality supervisor, teaching others the sewing techniques she'd once taught Sophia. Today was a milestone, the official opening of their new facility and the launch of their foundation. News crews waited outside, along with representatives from major retail chains across the country. What had begun as a desperate child selling dolls on the sidewalk had grown into a 7-figure business in just half a year. "There you are," Elena called, walking toward them with more energy than she'd shown in over a year. "The mayor just arrived, and the hospital director is asking where to set up the display about the Second Chance Fund. The Second Chance Fund, Alexander's idea, but named by Sophia, had started with a simple question: what about other families like theirs? Now, a portion of every doll sold went directly to help families facing medical costs they couldn't afford. The local hospital had already used the fund to help 15 families in need. "I still can't believe this is real," Sophia said quietly as they walked through the workshop. Workers smiled and waved as they passed, many of them parents who had previously struggled to find jobs that would accommodate their family obligations. Sophia's hope offered flexible hours, on-site childcare, and health benefits, all Alexander's non-negotiables when they'd set up the company structure. Outside, the crowd had grown. Cameras flashed as Elena cut the ribbon at the entrance. Alexander stood to one side, letting the spotlight fall on Sophia and her mother. A reporter thrust a microphone toward Sophia. "How does it feel to go from selling dolls on the street to running a $1 million company at just 12 years old?" the woman asked. Sophia thought for a moment. "It feels like a miracle," she said honestly. "But not because of the money, because my mom is healthy again, because people have jobs, because we're helping other families who were in the same situation we were." Later, as the crowds mingled and toured the facility, Alexander found Sophia sitting quietly in the small museum-like space they'd created at the entrance. It displayed her original table and the first 7 dolls she'd ever made, the ones Alexander had purchased that fateful evening. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I was just thinking about that day you found me," Sophia replied. "What if you'd taken your car instead of walking? What if you'd gone a different way?" Alexander smiled. "I thought about that too. Some might call it luck, but I think it was something more." A group of visiting executives entered the museum area, pointing at the display. One of them, recognizing Alexander, approached with an outstretched hand. "Reed, the board's been wondering where you've disappeared to. 6 months away from Reed Enterprises to play with dolls. But I must say, seeing all this, it's impressive." Alexander shook the man's hand. "Best decision I ever made, Tom. My company was running just fine without me, but Sophia and Elena, they needed a partner, not just a donation." "And now?" Tom asked, looking around at the bustling facility. "Now I remember why I started my first company," Alexander replied. "Not for the money or the success, but to make something meaningful." As the executives moved on, Sophia looked up at Alexander. "You never told me you took a leave from your company to help us." Alexander shrugged. "It wasn't important. What's important is what we built together." Through the windows, they could see Elena showing a group of children how the dolls were made. Her health returned, her skills valued, her future secure. In another room, doctors from the hospital were explaining how the Second Chance Fund worked for reporters. And all around them, people whose lives had been changed by one chance meeting on a city street. "You know," Sophia said, "I made those dolls hoping for a miracle. I just didn't expect it would come wearing a business suit." Alexander laughed. "And I certainly never expected my life would be changed by a 12-year-old selling dolls on the sidewalk." Together, they walked back out to join the celebration of what they'd built, not just a business, but a community of hope.